Welcome to another episode of Lifting the Lid on Technology. I'm Barry White, VCIO at SoftSource vBridge. This episode is proudly brought to you by Neat, our partner in simplifying hybrid work with intelligent communication devices that make every meeting seamless and inclusive. To dig deeper into any of the topics we have talked about today, visit our website, www.svbgroup.co.nz/insights, or connect with us on LinkedIn. We'd love to hear from you. Today I'm joined by Jason MacBride, Neat Regional Director for ANZ. Great to have you along, Jason.
Thank you for having me this morning, Barry.
Just sort of kick things off, and I guess for our audience in the collaboration meeting space, probably not that familiar with the Neat brand. Do you want to perhaps, as an introduction, I guess first of all, tell us a bit about yourself? I know you've had a long history with Poly and with HP, but perhaps tell us a little bit about your journey and perhaps give us a bit of an elevator overview of Neat.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Barry. I have been in the VC industry for over a decade and in this IT space for my entire career. So more decades than I care to admit, to be honest. I have been now with Neat for 2 years, and fantastic organization, incredible culture, Norwegian company, so very focused on design and very focused on people. And my team is fantastic. So I'm extremely fortunate to be at Neat. For those that don't know Neat well, I will share that, mention we are out of Norway, but our founders are actually the founders that started Tandberg way back in the day. And so while we're only a 6-year-old organization, our history and heritage and experience is just absolutely top of breed when it comes to this industry. We've got some of the best minds and capable people working with us. And so that has really helped move us to where we have gotten to in such a short period of time because of that legacy and because of that experience.
Today, I thought we'd perhaps do a bit of a state of the nation, and lots going on in this whole meeting collaboration space at the moment, particularly with the advent of AI, of course, and everybody's trying to figure out more efficient ways to work, etc. And I thought we might spend a bit of time. I know you're very familiar with this report, the IDC APAC Team Collaboration Benchmark Report, and there's some interesting sort of numbers that come out of that. But, one of the ones that kind of jumps out of the page is when you look at, particularly in the ANZ region, a relatively low percentage of organisations, I think in the kind of mid-30s, if I remember correctly, the feedback from that report suggested that relatively small percentage are really feeling they're getting value out of their collaboration tools. What, in your view, is the kind of, I guess, the barriers that's preventing organisations really achieving that kind of vision, if you like?
I think there's probably two really key areas. The first being that not all technology is created equally, right? And so if you have got older equipment and that haven't taken advantage of the improvements and advancements that the industry has offered over the last few years, that could play a contributing factor. Also, the tools itself in terms of what the organization's using and training, ensuring user adoption plays a really big role in that. But I think in terms of the AI component, it very much is around two pieces. So the first is from a company perspective around the AI data security perspective. And so what that means is, what's the company's roles and responsibilities as we start to share information? How do we lock down that information? How do we make sure that it doesn't leave the organization? Companies are still trying to get their head around the whole data component. And what does that mean from a VC perspective? And how many layers should we go down and be thinking about that? And then also from a personal perspective, users are also thinking about that as well. So their own personal information. When you look at the use of AI inside of the meeting room, the technology is there where we can assign meeting notes, we can assign actions, we can do meeting summaries, and they do that based on the voice, right? And or facial recognition. But either of those things that the end user has to opt in. And at the moment, we just haven't seen a huge adoption of end users opting in for that yet. We have seen I'm going to say low percentage of people that are leading the path in terms of jumping on board with the new technology. But as an industry and as a company wide, we haven't seen a number of companies that are saying, you know what, We are going to load your pictures in and have it recognized. We are going to ask you to record your voice. It's not a mandate yet. So I think there's a whole bunch of different elements that we're still trying to get our head around and make sure that we feel safe as we go through this journey.
I think you've touched on some interesting themes there that I've certainly almost on a daily basis get first-hand experience of. You mentioned the training there when I often go on site with clients and to do a presentation, and I'm invited in with a room full of people, and nobody in the room knows how to plug anything in, and they don't know how to get the screen going, and you spend 10 minutes faffing around just trying to get organised, and I think that's a pretty common theme. The other one, of course, I'm seeing most recently, and again, you touched on it there, was with AI. I think we're seeing a whole new line of shadow IT going on there. I was working with an organisation just recently, and they were in the medical space. I won't name who they are, and I was horrified by some of the tools that individuals had just picked up. IT had no real visibility of them, and they admitted after some scrutiny that they were talking about patients and privacy-related information on these calls, and they had these agents plugged into their various different tools, and yet they had the tools available to them, just nobody had ever trained them or showed them how to use them, right? So they just went off and did their own thing.
People always take the path of least resistance, right? And so if it's too hard, they'll find another way. Also on that AI piece and the meeting notes and the summaries and the actions being assigned, the system itself needs to be able to hear each of the individuals. And so that very much leans towards the quality of the microphones and how well the microphones are able to pick up those people. If your microphones are poor and you have a higher rate of errors on the recording, then the quality of the note-taking and the quality of the output and the summary is going to be far less. And so, having a high quality product and having a product which is going to give you the best results becomes even more important as we continue to lean in on this AI journey.
So across the ANZ sector, how are HR facilities and IT teams collaborating, with a view to building sort of more connected and productive workplaces? And, are there any kind of standout initiatives or partnerships that, you've seen firsthand that, in your view are driving better employment experiences and business outcomes?
One of the things that we have built into all of our products are sensors. And those sensors capture temperature and obnoxious gases and CO2 and humidity and a bunch of things. And so through the open APIs, you are able to take that data and then store it where you want, or plug that data into other applications. So into your workplace management system or your service desk application. And so one of the partnerships that we have worked with is with NeoWit. And NeoWit use AI-driven solutions to provide real-time office management bookings. You can book desks and meeting rooms. And one of the things that they do really well is around eliminating ghost meetings. So when someone books something and it's not used, then they release that room. But they can go even further in terms of the applications that they can plug into. And so we have done a joint solution for an aged care facility where they use the data from our systems and plug that into their own application and platform. And so when the sensors in the fridge get to a certain temperature, right, because if the fridge does not keep working and then the medication that's in there has to be disposed of, right? And so there's a flow-on effect. And so what they've done is they've taken all of the different sensors from within this aged care facility and plugged it into a central application. And we've become part of that application. We've become part of that overall solution. We're just another data point that they're able to track and manage. And when something happens, then it sets off this sequence of events. And, from an IT operations, facility management, finance, there are so many people who are interested in seeing these types of solutions come together because it touches all of them. So many different parts of the organization. There's no such thing as a silver bullet around an organization because the requirements for each end user is so different. But what I think you can do is you can find really great partnerships and you can find really great stories around how innovative companies can come together and create something quite unique.
I think that concept of ghost meeting bookings is really interesting. We, as a national-based company ourselves, we struggle with that. People book rooms for teams that are coming together from around the country, and you see that there's just nobody in the room, and it just sits there empty for an hour, right?
Super frustrating, right? When you need a room and you can't find one, and they're all booked, and you can see that a couple of them are empty.
Perhaps more of a sort of strategic question around sort of, workplace culture. And I'm really interested in your thoughts on this, because I know you travel reasonably extensively. But, here in New Zealand, we've seen some pushback as organisations have put pressure on their employees to return to the office and perhaps to return to a more, 5-day a week in the office kind of culture. What's been your observations there? Is it changing, or do you think this kind of idea of people working from home, certainly in specific industries, of course, is here to stay?
Organizations are still trying to figure out the right way about going about it, right? Well, the investment in property is still one of the big line items on a P&L. And if you're going to invest in the office, you want to make sure that you've got people there. Having people there, encouraging people back, means that the facilities need to be adequate for them to continue to function at least as good as, if not better than, operating at home. I do think that some organizations don't understand you don't know what you don't know, if that makes sense. And so they don't realize just how much innovation our industry has delivered over the last few years. And I'm a big believer of not all products are created equally, and you get what you pay for. From a personal perspective in my own life, and also, from a work perspective, there are differences in products out there. And so understanding what's available becomes even more important.
On that theme, one of Neat's philosophies is around sort of streamlining deployment and management. And, it touches on that whole concept you're saying there of making collaboration, really simple and intuitive. How does this approach, Neat's approach here, really address these common pain points? And of course, again, this was referring back to the IDC report. This was, again, one of those key areas that was highlighted.
I'll give one example, right? So one of the big challenges, and very hopefully you'll nod when I say this, but a very common scenario is in a large meeting room, everyone sits together, right? You've got the one camera at the front of the room. And then as the conversation around the table happens, the people at the front of the room, of course, turn around and look at all of the people in the middle and the back of the room. So the remote participant gets to see the side, or worst case, the back of the people at the front of the room's head. And it happened to me just a couple of weeks ago. I was presenting to a room of 15 people, and I had 5 remote participants. And the entire time I was at the front of the room, the 5 people on the remote side, they stared at the back of my head for an hour. And it's an awful experience, right? You're not engaged. You don't feel included. You don't participate in the call. They were almost invisible. And I had to keep turning around and looking at them throughout the meeting just to make sure that they were, still participating and listening. But we have now brought out the new Neat Center, which brings the cameras to the center of the table. And so when you're speaking around the table, it frames you from the front so they can see the front of your face. And when you look at them or the content, then it frames you from the front of the room device. And so that experience, that ability to be seen is so important, and it changes the whole engagement of those remote participants.
It's a bit like watching a concert with obscured view, really, isn't it? You're not going to get the same experience, and you're not going to be as immersed in the whole thing. But like watching Irish dancers from the waist up, right? So,
exactly right. Well said. Well said.
Look, on that issue, and this is a question I asked one of my recent guests who was in the HR space. On that issue of meeting equity, I've had a lot of discussion about this, and a lot of clients are talking to me about this as well. If we work on the assumption that this work from home culture is here to stay, what's your view on this? And some organisations are getting quite strong on this idea of cameras on, getting that engagement. What's your views around that?
I am a pro cameras on supporter. I find it really difficult because when you're in the office, you get to see people. And so just because you are remote doesn't mean we shouldn't be able to see you. I think it does play part of the culture, right, in terms of what's expected within the organization. So the video plays a huge part, and then also the audio. Sometimes I do think that companies forget about the audio. and not taking away from audio, in a laptop or in a home PC. But when you're on a professional call, it is nice to have a professional headpiece, right? Something that is going to help reduce the background noise, make sure that you're heard. And if you're able to enable your staff and provide a higher quality experience, it provides a better outcome for everybody. So there's a few things I think we can do to keep making sure that we get the best of that hybrid lifestyle.
Yeah, definitely. As somebody who works on a podcast from time to time, I definitely hear you, and you're right. It's just so much more immersive that, as you say, you've got hear everybody properly, and their voices commanding, and so forth. Can we turn to this? And there's a lot of thought leadership around this and growing to a degree around sustainability, and organisations now linking their investments in collaboration tools to sustainability. What's your thoughts on that one? And that also gets into room design, I guess, as well, right down to the space itself, not just the technology.
From that IDC report, I think it was 73% of organizations are linking investments into sustainability and cost-effective goals, which is an incredible number, just a huge number. But what it does show is that companies are moving away from just looking for great products or a great price, but they're looking for partnerships, they're looking for outcomes, and they're looking for those to be tied into strategic initiatives. And so, when you look at what NEAT is doing, we are very focused, as I mentioned, from that Norwegian background around design. And that design is not just around the actual physical products. Yes, we look at what the products are made of, but we also look at how they are designed from a packaging perspective, about what products get used inside of the packaging. How do we make sure that they remain safe but are still eco-friendly? And so that really is important to us, along with a design perspective around, how many units can you get per pallet, right? So that when we move these units around the world, we're being as most effective as we can be. But the underlying theme is that organizations are using more and more people to make these decisions. It's no longer just an IT decision. Now we've got workplace management people, and we've got sustainability teams, and we've got HR and finance. Like, we've got so many more people weighing in on these decisions to make sure that organizations are dealing with other organizations that are on the same path and same journey around the sustainability content.
So carrying on that theme, Jason, and a slightly personal question, drawing on your experience at Polycom and of course HP, following on from that, and now NEAT, what's the biggest lesson you've learned about driving successful collaboration? And I guess particularly with a kind of an ANZ lens on.
Yeah, so there's probably a couple of things. I might share a couple of stories. So one is, as I mentioned before, not all products are created equally. So I would encourage everyone out there to do a proper look, right? A thorough look around what's out there in the market. And I say that because whatever solution a company chooses, it needs to be fit for purpose, right? And I also don't believe that there's any single magic bullet out there. There's no magic company that can do absolutely everything that a company desires from end to end. There are so many unique requirements that a company has for certain spaces or certain rooms or certain times. And so you have to understand what's available out there, pros and cons around each of those, and then make the best decision. I'll share a couple stories. One is, we've got a IT service provider based in Queensland, and they had moved to us from another vendor, and they'd been with us for 9 months. And I said to them, over that 9 months, how many tickets, service requests have you raised on us? And he stopped and thought about it for a minute and said, you know what? None. And I said, that's pretty impressive, but give me some context, because coming from where you were, was it also none? If it's none and none, then you've got two very stable products, right? And he said, no, we had between 2 and 4 a week. So he said almost one a day. He said, so going from that much noise, right, and challenges and pain points and making sure that the product was up and reliable for people to use, to going to this, he said it's been a huge change and shift, but not just in people's view of the technology in the rooms, but also the brand and reputation of the IT team, right? And how they are perceived inside the business. The other example I'll use is just around a global healthcare manufacturing company. And they did an evaluation of our product. And the one thing that really stood out for them as a differentiator, key differentiator, was the management platform. Because with our management platform, they could do everything to their devices remotely around the world from their desk in Sydney. And the power, the granularity, the control that they had, they said, was just night and day in terms of how they were able to support their users and manage the products and take control of their systems. So, there's value in a whole bunch of different things, but until you really get your hands dirty, until you get to experience the different technologies, then it's very difficult to make that kind of determination just off of a spec sheet or off of a website.
Yeah. I think a lot of organizations underestimate or don't, I guess, appropriately apply the level of, shall we say, for this VC equipment, that it really is mission critical, right? You could be doing one of the biggest pitches your company's ever done, right? And if it all goes awry, then your reputation just looks really bad, right? So I think companies don't put enough investment into getting that right, and not just in terms of implementing the technology, but as you say, maintaining it, because things do go wrong, right? And updates occur, and people change things and unplug things and all that sort of carry on. So I think it's an area that organizations do need to spend a lot. And I gave the example earlier that I frequently go into organizations and lose 15, 20 minutes at the beginning just trying to figure out how their AV works, because nobody there knows, right? So
I like to think that those are days gone by, but it is. I know it still happens out there, but hopefully less frequently as we have started to make things far more reliable.
I'm conscious of the time, Jason, but before I let you go, we quite like to do a few what we call quick fire questions. So, come back with the first thing that comes into your head. So first up, what's the one piece of tech that you couldn't do without, work or personal?
Well, first thing that comes to mind is headphones. Without headphones, I don't think I would be able to get through flights. I need those headphones to listen to music and podcasts and function. Yeah, definitely headphones.
Yeah. This is a fun question. If you could have a meeting anywhere in the world, where would it be?
Oof. I'm going to say probably Italy or Spain, somewhere on the coast up there. That's probably one part of the world that I haven't been to yet, and I'm itching to get to. So let's choose a meeting up there.
What's your go-to productivity hack or app?
I'm embarrassed to say it's a stack of applications. I can't function without email and Slack, and just making sure that even WhatsApp, actually, with my team, just making sure that I've got all applications covered with my team and I don't miss anything. That's my go-to when I first wake up.
Here's the last one for you. I might have to think about this one. What's the strangest place you've ever joined a video call from?
Strangest place I've ever joined a video call? Probably a moving car, maybe, on the go.
Yeah, I think we've all done that one. Probably a little bit illegally too, I suspect. I hate to admit this. I've actually joined a conference call from a lavatory once, but we won't mention that one again.
I haven't done that. Thank goodness.
Maybe I made that up. Jason, look, I know you're a really busy man. You've just flown in from Hawaii, I believe, and you're now in Brisbane, and no doubt you're flying somewhere else. So, as I said before, our team here is getting pretty excited about some of the technology that's coming out of NEAT, and it'd be great to talk to you again at some stage as this whole space unfolds.
I'm looking forward to it. Hey, thank you so much to you and the entire team. It's been a really great experience and a lot of fun doing this, and looking forward to seeing you when I'm next over in NZ.
Yeah, I look forward to it. Thanks again. That brings us to the end of this episode of Lifting the Lid on Technology. Thank you, NEAT, for supporting the podcast. To learn more about how SoftSource vBridge can support you on any of the topics covered today, visit svbgroup.co.nz/insights or find us on LinkedIn. We'd love to hear from you. I'm Barry White, and thanks for listening. Join us next time.